Hi, this is Peggy from RAR. So our wonderful guest today is my great friend Zemfira Khisaeva. So Zemfira is head of technology and enterprise strategy at Scotiabank. So thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for answering the survey. We're looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the new normal in financial services. So let's get going. So first question, from your perspective, Zemfira, what are the major lasting impacts that COVID will have on the financial services industry?
So let me answer this question. So first of all, Peggy, it's always nice to chat to you. You've been a good friend, and I feel honored to being able to answer your questions.
Thank you.
So, but you know, when I think about impact of COVID, I really like to kind of slice it into a couple of chunks. So one is the immediate effect, which is more of the next couple of years, and more a long-term impact, which is more of what the new norm will be. And maybe that's kind of jumping ahead with some of your other questions. But I think the immediate impact is kind of we see that already, right? So what that is, it's a recession. So the sheer fact that multiple small businesses are not able to run, they have to close down, multiple people have lost their jobs. So we're just at the beginning of it, and what's coming is probably going to be much worse. This is my personal perspective. Mm-hmm. And I think what ultimately that means is that whether it's financial industry or not, we just need to weather the storm. And any corporation, whether that's within a bank or fintech or a challenger bank within this ecosystem, will be facing similar challenges of the significant reduction in revenues, increased loan losses, as well, in addition to continuing operating remotely. So I think that is the very immediate impact. If I were to think about, the finance industry and how COVID has shifted it, there's I'm not going to say anything new from what you don't know, but ultimately, number one thing, it's how we. So again, I'll split it in three different parts. One is from regulatory standpoint, another one from the operational standpoint, and the third one from the technology standpoint. Mm-hmm. So regulatory, I think, is an interesting one, because if in 2008 crisis, what became important is the financial stability of the banks and ability to have enough capital to weather the storm, I think this crisis will heighten some of the thinking around credit losses and how we account for them, and how they are all being entered as a part of the financial stability equation. Yeah. And then the second part is, we've been talking a lot about open banking and how it will enable consumers in the Canadian space. And I think it's always been pre-COVID, it's always been looked through the lens of security and privacy. Mm-hmm. I think post-COVID world actually has, we've seen a lot of moves in funds in the early days of COVID to have open banking happen, that have become a big challenge, right, for the financial stability of the system. So I think that will be a very tactical regulatory impact as well. So that's regulations. From operations standpoint, the emergence of the distributed workforce that we've never seen before is definitely something that I observe now. And I just saw recently Gartner survey, and I believe that it was showing that up to 30% of people will never come back in the financial industry, will never come back to work from the office. So obviously the implications to the, where we hire people, how they work, anything from technology to processes of people management is going to be affected. And then as well as just sugar, what that where those people, in which countries we even going to hire those people from, right? So that's the operational one. And then maybe the last piece is so obviously the cost equation becomes also very important, and that's important both from the standpoint of we want to go after the customer, so what customer wants, so the digitization, and we've seen the uptake of digital, significant one, compared to where we were before. So enabling that is very immediate priority for financial institutions, but also in the long term, the back end digitization, and then reduction in paper processes, reduction in just generally heavy processes will probably take on a larger, will become a bigger emphasis within the financial sector.
Yeah. So in terms of regulation, you mentioned capital ratio with the loan losses, you mentioned open banking. Any other regulations you see that might come from COVID based on, I don't know, new underwriting rules due to the fact that now, your clients might be shut down for 3 months overnight? Any other regulations you think might happen, or just because people are working from home, so that needs to be like for trading, that needs to be allowed? In anything else you see?
I think those are probably the two biggest ones, but I think privacy and security, obviously, and when you work from home, you don't really have as much of oversight as you would have had within the walls of a larger institution. But not just oversight, but just, we have 3 firewalls. If I were to work from the bank, from the back premises, and then here I have a VPN connection that's with double authentication, but then obviously not the same level of security. So I think those will become important elements to keep in mind. And obviously, banking industry is heavily regulated, so all this will play in one or another format, what can be done, how we will be doing things.
And so you mentioned the financial order, the global financial order. So what do you see? One of the things that I'm personally concerned about is cyber attacks, because to your point, people are working remotely now. They're way more vulnerable, clients as well. We've seen during COVID that there was a lot of increase in cyber attacks. What's your thoughts in terms of the financial order and where we might be heading?
Well, I think from the cyber security standpoint, I believe all financial institutions are doing as much as possible at strengthening our ability to both monitor applications, monitor actions, and prevent data losses, and ensure that the privacy is the top priority. Mm-hmm. So I don't really have the stats. I'm not going to, so don't quote me on this, but I don't think that we've seen as much of uptake in security standpoint, although there's a lot of phishing attacks where people are using COVID as an opportunity to do the frauds. So I think those are probably things that will proliferate in the short term. But in the long term, key is to make sure that we don't expose vulnerabilities from the standpoint of people working from home.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I have to admit, it's probably what's worrying me the most in terms of global stability, like massive cyber attacks coming from entities, outside of North America that wants to destabilize the market. So it's maybe my own paranoid personality, who knows. Changing gears, so you're working at a large financial institution. Some may call that an incumbent. So in terms of resetting competition and competitive positioning, COVID has been good at throwing everything in the air. What do you think in terms of competition? What type of financial organization you think will win or will benefit at least from the crisis, and a contrary of the ones you believe that might suffer from the crisis?
Yeah, it's a very good question and an interesting one. I can tell you a bit of the history and the context, within the banking industry. I think 3-4 years ago, we've been all questioning of the uptake of fintechs and how they're going to take off the payment industry. Then we were all talking about the big techs, of how Amazon and Facebook going to enter that. And then I think last year it all shifted to neobanks and how neobanks can actually, or challenger banks, how can they come in and then take a larger piece of the pie. And none of those threats or fears actually materialized. So I think what banking industry is all about, and I'm going to talk about in the context of Canada, because different jurisdictions are different, both from behavioral and regulatory standpoint. I think Canada is a pretty conservative country. We see much lower adoption of digital in Canada than in some other jurisdictions. We also see that customers really trust banks, although they always complain, but nevertheless they never leave banks.
Exactly.
Right. We also see that we are very heavily regulated in Canada, and so the government actually is playing a big part in ensuring the stability of the systems. Mm-hmm. And then the second point is what banks are really in the business of. And the banks are really in the business of trust and then the business of managing risk. So if you were to say, well, the competition, who is going to win? I do think the incumbents actually will put in a much better position with COVID than some of the smaller players, by sheer fact that they have a bigger balance sheet. Mm-hmm. And they're able to manage some of the relief programs and and take on also losses that other institutions wouldn't have. Right? So I think that's where who's probably going to be the winner.
I'm with you on this one. So if you look at traditional FI, so in terms of transformation, which is really your sweet spot, obviously COVID is accelerating digital transformation, throwing a curveball in everyone's roadmap and strategy. So what do you see happening in terms of digital transformation there?
I love this question because I'm so passionate about it. It's probably the number one thing in the banking industry that attracted me to the banking industry in the first place, just to see how the transformation really reshaping it and what it's doing to banks. So I think up to now, the major strides in digitization within large banks were at the front end. So basically, making sure that we have a mobile app that is on par with our competitors, making sure that people are able to apply, authenticate, or do certain operations, so banking operations online. So now I see that two things are happening. One is obviously a rapid digitization with the customer, from the customer standpoint. So customers are much more open to bank online, which also drives both volumes and more, more, and some of the thinking around how do we make sure that we will continue in that momentum. But I also see that a lot of, just from sheer fact operational standpoint, we had to send a lot of people to work from home, meant that we had to eliminate paper processes. So there was big investment in eliminating those, ensuring people can work safely, and then digitizing that part of the operations. And where I see it's going to move on is basically, it's almost like saying we've been in the front end, we accelerated mid-office digitization, and now we're going to go towards the back office. So I do see that there's going to be a significant uptake, just by sheer momentum that we have to drive this.
And talking about transformation, so now we are shifting to something more personal. What are the old habits that maybe you shed and you replaced by great habits during COVID?
I think it's I'm not sure whether it's great habits. It's definitely something that that I learned, both personal and just from the standpoint of how to lead the team. So I think one is I'm definitely more open to working from home. And I also see that there's some challenges with it, but also certain productivity that comes with it. at the same time, I do now more, it's easy. I found that it was easy to push initiatives faster that have started pre-COVID with people whom I know very well from pre-COVID world. I found that it's very hard to build new relationships remotely, and it's very hard to initiate large transformations remotely. So I think those are, if I were to say, well, what I prioritize to do from home and what are the things that I would prefer to do in person, I think that's kind of one of the learnings. And I'll say the second one was on the personal side, I actually enjoy that time by myself where all the external stimuli that usually get me really excited about work and about my life were gone. And then I had to spend more time really reflecting on what is important, what is, in the absence of anything, what is it there for me and what can I learn from it? So I think that reflection, the time of reflection is probably something that I never realized that I needed before. And so I'm gonna spend more time carving out time for that in the future.
That's wonderful. Well, any last words, or we're ready to close? You answered all the questions. Even actually your first answer was already pretty much covering everything, because as always it was so thoughtful. So thank you so much for that. Any last words? Otherwise we're done.
I guess, well, Peggy, well, thank you for for championing this. You've been like I mentioned, you've been a great friend, and anything I can do, and if you have any more questions, happy to.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for taking the time and sharing your thoughts, and thank you for answering the survey.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.